Red Foxx. John Elroy Sanford was born on December 9, 1922 in St. Louis, Missouri, and his early years were defined by abandonment and poverty. Fred Sanford Sr., an electrician from Kentucky, walked out on the family when his son was roughly 4 years old, leaving Mary Hughes to raise the boy alone on Chicago's South Side. Mary worked as a domestic worker and had half Seminole ancestry, but her wages couldn't keep the family fed. The poverty ran so deep that Foxx later remembered digging through trash cans looking for food just to survive the day. At 16, he hopped a freight train headed to New York City with a singing group called the Four Bonbons, leaving behind whatever education he'd gotten at DuSable High School in Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood, where his classmate happened to be Harold Washington, the future mayor of Chicago. The 1940s found him washing dishes at Jimmy's Chicken Shack in Harlem, and that's where he met another young man with reddish hair working the same kind of dead-end job. Malcolm Little, who'd become Malcolm X years later, earned the nickname Detroit Red while Sanford became Chicago Red. Malcolm X would write in his autobiography that Foxx was the funniest dishwasher on this earth, and the friendship shaped both their lives in ways neither could have predicted. The stage name came together during those Harlem years. Red referred to his red hair and ruddy complexion, while Foxx borrowed from baseball player Jimmy Foxx and added an extra X for style. What set him apart from other struggling comedians was his willingness to record material too explicit for mainstream audiences. Party records, as they became known, were adults-only spoken comedy albums that Foxx claimed he originated back in 1956.
I sat in the face bowl and threw up in the toilet.
His first album, Laugh of the Party, paid him just $25. But between 1956 and 1961, Dootsie Records released 35 albums that sold millions of copies. White-owned stores refused to stock them because the material was too blue, which meant the albums moved through black communities exclusively and built him a devoted underground following. More than 50 comedy albums later, he'd earned the title King of the Party Records and parlayed that success into nightclub work. Las Vegas came calling, and Foxx became one of the first black comics to headline for white audiences on the Strip instead of performing for segregated black crowds in the back rooms. His 1970 film Cotton Comes to Harlem put him on screen as a junk dealer named Uncle Bud, and that role caught the attention of producer Norman Lear, who was looking for someone to anchor a new sitcom about a junk dealer and his son. Sanford and Son premiered on NBC on January 14, 1972, and the pilot episode pulled a 52 share, which reportedly beat the World Series that year.
You know, sometimes you really sound like a weirdo.
See, there you go already. Weirdo, that's Spanish.
The show landed in 6th place during its first season in the Nielsen rankings, then climbed to 2nd the following year and stayed in the top 10 for 5 consecutive seasons. 20 million viewers tuned in weekly at the show's peak, and it became the first black sitcom to cross the 100-episode threshold before wrapping up on March 25, 1977, after 6 seasons and 136 episodes total. Fred Sanford ran a salvage yard at 9114 South Central Avenue in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles alongside his son Lamont, played by Damon Wilson. The character was 65 years old in the show, even though Foxx was only 48 when filming started. Norman Lear based the series on a British show called Steptoe and Son about Cockney rag and bone dealers, but he transplanted the story to Watts, the neighborhood that had burned during the 1965 rebellion, and remained synonymous with poverty and unrest in the American imagination. Fred G. Sanford got his name from Foxx's real brother, who died at 46, while Lamont was named after Lamont Ousley, a childhood friend from the singing group days. What made Fred Sanford revolutionary was that he became the first successful black sitcom lead in nearly 2 decades, filling a void that had existed since Amos and Andy ended in 1953. Fred wasn't sanitized or softened for white audiences. He schemed, he argued, he owned his own business without answering to any white boss, and he possessed real economic agency in a way black characters almost never did on television. The show depicted working-class struggle without making Fred look criminal or dependent on handouts, and his flaws didn't erase the genuine love he had for his son. "You big dummy" became one catchphrase.
You dummy!
But the fake heart attacks became his signature move. "This is the big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join ya, honey," he'd shout while clutching his chest and staggering around the junkyard.
What are you doing in my dressing room?
It's her. It's you. Oh. Oh, this is a big one. You hear that, Elizabeth? I'm coming to join you, honey.
Those theatrical routines came straight from his childhood, inspired by his mother Mary, who faked illnesses throughout his life whenever she wanted attention or sympathy. Golden Globe voters gave him Best TV Actor in Comedy or Musical in 1973, and Emmy voters nominated him 3 consecutive years from 1972 through 74, though he never won the statue. His starting salary was $19,000 per episode, roughly $134,581 when you adjust to 2024 money. A 1974 contract dispute led to him walking off the show, which prompted Tandem Productions to sue him for $10 million, but when the dust settled, he'd secured $25,000 per episode plus 25% of the producer's net profits, putting him on equal footing with Carol O'Connor's All in the Family compensation. At his peak, he earned $35,000 per episode, and People magazine reported he pulled in $4 million in a single year. That money vanished as fast as it came in. Lavish spending and generosity to friends and family drained his accounts, and he filed for bankruptcy in 1983. November 28, 1989, brought the low point when IRS agents showed up to seize everything he owned. They took his Las Vegas home, 7 vehicles, including a 1927 Model T, $12,769 in cash, roughly a dozen guns, and 300 other items. His tax debt stood at $755,166.21 for the years 1983 through 86, but penalties pushed that to $996,630. When he died, the total had climbed past $3.6 million. Foxx told reporters the agents took his necklace and ID bracelet right off his wrist and pulled the money out of his pocket, saying they treated him like he wasn't human at all. October 11, 1991 found him rehearsing for a CBS sitcom called The Royal Family, which Eddie Murphy was producing. An altercation with a producer preceded his collapse on set, but cast members thought he was doing his famous fake heart attack routine and waited too long before calling for help. Doctors got his heart beating again temporarily, but they pronounced him dead 4.5 hours after he reached the hospital. Eddie Murphy covered the entire funeral because Foxx's financial troubles had left him with nothing to pass on. Palm Memorial Park in Las Vegas became his final resting place, and his mother Mary outlived him by 2 years before joining him in the plot next to his. John Amos. John Allen Amos Jr. entered the world on December 27, 1939, in Newark, New Jersey, raised by his father John A. Amos Sr., who worked as an auto mechanic, and his mother Annabelle P. Amos. East Orange, New Jersey, shaped his childhood, and after graduating from East Orange High School in 1958, he moved through Long Beach City College and Colorado State University before earning a sociology degree. Boxing came naturally to him, and he won a Golden Gloves championship before football pulled him in a different direction. The Denver Broncos in the American Football League signed him as a free agent in 1964, but a pulled hamstring got him cut on the second day of training camp. 7 different minor league teams gave him chances between 1964 and 67, but the dream of playing professionally kept slipping further away. Kansas City Chiefs coach Hank Stram delivered the words that ended his athletic career in 1967, telling Amos he wasn't a football player but rather a man trying to play football. Stram encouraged him to chase his writing interests instead, and that advice redirected his entire life. Social work at the Vera Institute of Justice in the Brooklyn House of Detention paid the bills for a while, along with work as an advertising copywriter. CBS hired him as a staff writer on The Leslie Uggams Show in 1969, and his 1971 stage debut in Norman, Is That You? Earned him a Los Angeles Drama Critics nomination for Best Actor. Television work came through The Mary Tyler Moore Show from 1970 to 73, where he played Gordie Howard, the weatherman, and the only black character on the series. Norman Lear noticed that performance and filed it away for future use. Maude brought him back to Lear's universe for 3 episodes between 1973 and 74, playing Henry Evans, the husband to Florida Evans portrayed by Esther Roll. The character worked as a firefighter living in suburban Tuckahoe, New York, which looked nothing like the housing project setting that would define Good Times.
Gee, a gorgeous hunk of woman here.
When Lear developed the spin-off, producers initially planned to skip the father figure entirely, but Rowley refused to participate unless they included a husband. She couldn't compound the lie that black fathers don't care about their children, and she wanted America to see that black men stay with their families and raise their kids. Good Times premiered on CBS on February 8, 1974, becoming the first network television sitcom built around a black 2-parent family. Apartment 17C at 963 North Gilbert Avenue sat in a public housing project on Chicago's South Side, representing Cabrini Green homes without naming it explicitly. Co-creator Eric Monti had grown up in Cabrini Green and based the entire show on his own experiences, modeling James Evans after his stepfather Bill Haynes, a factory worker who'd come up from Mississippi. James Evans Sr. worked 2 manual labor jobs despite never getting past 6th grade, stern but loving and determined to see his children escape the projects. The show landed as the 17th highest-rated program during its premiere season, then jumped to 7th in Nielsen ratings for 1974 through 75. More than 25% of all American households watched it weekly at the peak. Eric Deggans from NPR wrote that growing up as a young black boy in a home without his father, the best window he had into what a concerned, powerful, ethical male presence might look like came from watching how James Sr. worked with Florida Evans to keep their kids on track. Production created some strange dynamics. Amos was only 34 when filming began, just 8 years older than Jimmy Walker, who played his son JJ, and 19 years younger than Esther Roll, who played his wife. Bernadette Stanis played Thelma Evans, Ralph Carter played Michael Evans, Jeanette Dubois played Willona Woods, and Janet Jackson joined as Penny Gordon Woods from 1977 through 79. Conflict erupted almost immediately between Amos and the white writers on staff. Eric Monte described weekly arguments where writers pushed stereotypes and he refused to accept them. Every week they fought, and writers would ignore Monte's suggestions and bring stereotypical material to the cast, which made Amos and Roll furious. Then writers would give them what Monte had written, and suddenly the cast approved. Monte had envisioned JJ as a street-smart hustler who drove his honest, hard-working parents crazy, not the buffoonish character who emerged with his dynamite catchphrase and chicken hat appearing every third page.
Aren't you glad you lit your fingers duty walking? Cause you got kids and dynamite?
Amos challenged scripts with increasing directness as the show progressed. When writers cited their credentials and experience, he asked them how long they'd been black. His 2014 Archive of American Television interview revealed that the show started with no African-American writers at all. Their perception of what a black family would be and what a black father would be differed completely from his understanding, and his came from lived reality. Too much emphasis went to JJ and his antics when Michael aspired to become a Supreme Court justice and Thelma wanted to be a surgeon. 3 seasons of conflict ended with his firing at the conclusion of Season 3 in 1976, officially labeled as letting go a disruptive element. Norman Lear called him one day to share 2 pieces of news, the good news being that the show had been picked up for 24 more episodes, and the bad news being that Amos wouldn't be part of them. A long pause followed before Lear asked if Amos was still there. Amos told him yes, though he reflected later that he really wasn't. A car accident killed James Evans while he was traveling to an out-of-state construction job in the Season 4 premiere. The episode following his departure gave television one of its most powerful moments. Florida puts away dishes from James's wake when she spots a flower he'd left for her, continues working for a moment, then stops and smashes a bowl on the kitchen floor while screaming, "Damn, damn, damn." Raw grief poured through that scene in a way sitcoms rarely captured. Roll shared Amos's concerns about JJ's direction and left after Season 4 in 1977, calling the show a clown show. CBS Vice President Steve Mills admitted they'd lost the essence of the show without parental guidance, and Roll returned for Season 6 after securing a higher salary, better scripts, and promises to make JJ more responsible. The timing of his firing lined up perfectly with Roots entering production. ABC aired the miniseries from January 23rd through 30th, 1977, over 8 consecutive nights. Amos played the adult Kunta Kinte, also called Toby, following LeVar Burton's portrayal of the young version. Somewhere between 130 and 140 million viewers watched, representing more than half the 1977 United States population and the largest audience any television series had ever attracted in American history up to that point. The finale held the single-episode ratings record until the MASH finale broke it in 1983, and 85% of all television homes caught at least part of the miniseries. Outstanding Lead Actor Emmy nomination came his way for Roots, and he called it a life-changing role both as an actor and from a humanistic standpoint. All the misconceptions and stereotypical roles he'd lived through and seen offered to him culminated in this part, like a reward for suffering those indignities. The timing struck him as almost divine, with Good Times killing off his character and telling him he'd never work again, but then God gave him a role in a little program called Roots. Sherman Hemsley. Sherman Alexander Hemsley came into the world on February 1, 1938, in South Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, raised by his mother who earned wages at a lamp factory. William Hemsley, a printing press worker, was absent from his son's life until Sherman turned 14 and met him for the first time. Barat Middle School saw him through his early years, before he enrolled at Bach Technical High School hoping to learn tailoring, but he dropped out after 10th grade when he realized how hard it was to do those little stitches. 4 years in the United States Air Force followed, with stations in Japan and Korea shaping his young adulthood. Post-military life found him working for the United States Postal Service during daylight hours while studying acting at night at the Academy of Dramatic Arts in Philadelphia. New York called him eventually, and he kept his post office job while pursuing roles and training with Lloyd Richards at the Negro Ensemble Company before joining Vinette Carroll's Urban Arts Company. Broadway opened up in 1970 when he debuted in Pearly playing Gitlow, then toured with the production for a full year. Norman Lear caught the show and immediately pictured Hemsley as George Jefferson. All in the Family introduced the Jefferson family in 1971, but Hemsley was still locked into the Pearly tour when Lear needed him. The solution came in creating brother Henry Jefferson, played by Mel Stewart, as a placeholder, and Lear held the George Jefferson role open for 2 full years until Hemsley became available. Louise Jefferson, brought to life by Isabel Sanford, first appeared on March 2, 1971, but George didn't show up until 1973, when Hemsley's schedule finally cleared. The Jefferson family departure episode titled The Jeffersons Move Up aired on January 11, 1975, and the spin-off premiered 1 week later on January 18. 11 seasons and 253 episodes ran from that premiere through the finale on July 2, 1985, making it the longest-running broadcast network series with black leads in television history. The 1981 through 82 season pushed the show to 3rd place nationally, marking the first time a black sitcom ranked as television's top comedy for an entire season. Time slot changes hit the show at least 15 different times during its run, yet ratings held strong until the final season when another move dropped them to 59th. George Jefferson owned Jefferson Cleaners, a dry cleaning chain that started with 5 stores and expanded as the series progressed. His success story began with $5,000 he won from a bus accident lawsuit, mentioned back in All in the Family Season 1. The family's journey ran from sharecroppers in Alabama, through janitor work, and finally to dry cleaning empire. Colby East served as the setting, a fictional luxury high-rise on East 63rd Street on Manhattan's Upper East Side, light years away from the working-class Queens neighborhood the Jeffersons left behind. Norman Lear designed George as the black Archie Bunker from the beginning. Seeing Hemsley and Pearlie planted the image permanently, and from the moment Lear considered moving a black family next door to Archie, he couldn't get Hemsley out of his head. The description he used was natural irritant, prouder and feistier, and more pugnacious than Archie, smaller in stature but capable of getting under Archie's skin in ways larger men couldn't, short-tempered, pompous, prejudiced, and loud-mouthed.
I turned down a corner there, I call that the bunker fold. And there ain't no bunker fold in that.
George called white people honkies and clashed constantly with neighbors, Tom and Helen Willis, played by Franklin Cover and Roxy Roker. The Willis couple represented the first interracial married couple featured prominently on American network television. Roxy Roker happened to be Lenny Kravitz's mother in real life, married to white television producer Cy Kravitz, which meant the Willis character's interracial marriage reflected her actual life experience. Casting this relationship took serious cultural risk, normalizing interracial relationships for a national audience while using George Jefferson's disapproval to satirize every form of racial prejudice. Jeanette Dubois from Good Times wrote the theme song Movin' On Up alongside legendary songwriter Jeff Barry. Dubois approached Norman Lear wanting to expand beyond acting, and Lear suggested she write a theme for his new dry cleaner show. She struggled with it until her mother encouraged her to draw from her personal dream of providing a comfortable retirement. The song never got released as a single but became iconic anyway. Ludacris told Rolling Stone years later that it was every black person's favorite television theme because they were moving on up. Isabel Sanford was 21 years older than Hemsley, in reality, creating an unusual pairing. Their first meeting prompted her to recall later that the director announced Isabel, "This is your husband," and she looked at this little man she could have squashed like a bug, unable to see how John thought they'd make a great-looking couple. Hemsley asked Sanford if he could call her character Wheezy, the nickname pulled from a real-life crush he'd once had on a girl named Louise. Chemistry transcended the age gap and became the show's emotional foundation. Playing George challenged Hemsley personally, as he admitted in his 2003 Archive of American Television interview that being rude was hard for him, but he had to stay true to the character. Pulling back anything would have broken it.
Well, all that was really hard for me because it's just rude and just not like be that way. But it was the character. I had to do it. I had to be true to the character.
The confrontational nature and pimp walk strut came from deliberate choices. Mark Anthony Neal wrote in Ebony that George Jefferson's over-the-top behavior was calibrated deliberately to make the show and character more palatable to audiences not quite ready to accept blacks as equals. Making George a little ridiculous softened the blow and let the message slip through. The Jeffersons emerged directly from criticism Norman Lear received about his previous shows. 3 Black Panthers visited his CBS office to complain that every time you saw a black man on television, he was dirt poor, wore terrible clothes, and couldn't afford anything. That conversation sparked the Jeffersons concept. Howard University analysis later noted the show highlighted black entrepreneurship and demonstrated that through resilience, black people could amass wealth and live the American dream. It reframed black masculinity and showcased the strength of black women in ways television hadn't attempted before. Emmy voters nominated Hemsley in 1984 for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Comedy Series, and Golden Globe voters nominated him in 1985 for Best Actor in TV Series, Comedy, or Musical. The NAACP Image Award came in 1982 for Best Performance by an Actor in Comedy Series. Isabel Sanford collected 7 Emmy nominations from 1979 through 85, winning in 81 and becoming the second black actress to win an Emmy for Best Actress. The Television Academy Hall of Fame inducted Hemsley in 2012. CBS canceled the show in 1985 without allowing a proper series finale, and cast members learned about it from newspapers and Entertainment Tonight rather than the network. Hemsley found out by reading it in the newspaper. Sanford heard about it from a cousin who read tabloids and called the network disrespectful. Franklin Cover discovered it watching Entertainment Tonight. The announcement came at CBS's upfront presentation on May 7, 1985, nearly 2 months before the final episode aired on July 2nd. The show had ranked 19th the previous season, still pulling solid numbers. Reclusive describes how Hemsley approached fame, avoiding the Hollywood limelight whenever possible. Longtime friend Jackie Harry said he was so popular and didn't even know it, noting he was a very private person, unlike George Jefferson. Flora Enchinton recalled that by the time she met Hemsley later in his life, he and his partner had come running from Los Angeles with not one penny, facing nothing but struggle. Co-star Damon Evans stated publicly in 2025 that Hemsley was gay, calling it an open secret and explaining that he dated a Puerto Rican guy, they lived together, and his boyfriend attended tapings. Hemsley never discussed his personal life publicly during his lifetime. NBC's Amen ran from 1986 through 91, giving Hemsley 5 seasons and 110 episodes as Deacon Ernest Fry. He voiced B.P. Richfield on Dinosaurs from 1991 through 94, and he reprised George Jefferson on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, and again in 2011 on Tyler Perry's House of Pain alongside Marla Gibbs as Florence, marking his final television appearance. July 24, 2012 brought his death at his El Paso, Texas home from superior vena cava syndrome, a complication of lung and bronchial carcinomas. Flora Enchinton was named sole beneficiary of his will, but Richard Thornton, a Philadelphia man claiming to be Hemsley's brother, contested it and stopped funeral arrangements. Months passed with Hemsley's body sitting unburied at San Jose Funeral Home in El Paso until Judge Patricia Chu ruled in favor of Enchinton on November 9, 2012. A military funeral followed, and Fort Bliss National Cemetery in El Paso became his final resting place. Norman Lear's tribute called him a love of a guy and immensely talented. If you like this analysis, you'll love where I go next. Click the video on your screen and find out.